This is assignment 4.3.1 Data Collection Methods by Joey Webben. Introduction. A research design is a set of methods and procedures used in collecting and analyzing measures of the variables specified in the research problem. There are 6 different research designs that I will be covering throughout the presentation. These are correlational, case study, longitudinal, comparative, cross-sectional, and experimental design. The first design we'll be looking at is the correlational study. A correlational study determines whether the variables are linked. This aims to discover whether an increase or decrease in one variable causes an increase or decrease in another variable. Advantages. This determines whether there is a link between the two variables. It allows the researcher to alter a lot more data than the experimenter. Results are more applicable to everyday life. Disadvantages: only uncovers a relationship and cannot provide a conclusion, and it doesn't reveal which variables influence the other. Sporting example is the effect that stretching has on British female athletes when they are performing floor. By using a correlational study to do this experiment, it would allow the researcher to see if there is a relationship between stretching and the performance that the female athletes have on the floor routine. The next study that we will be looking at is case studies. A case study is an in-depth investigation of a single person, group, event, or community. Usually data is gathered from methods like interviews or observations. There will possibly be measurements on that specific individual or team. Advantages: it is rich data as a conclusion is formed at the end of the study explaining the findings. Gives an unbiased introduction to the case study. Results can be used to improve lifestyles. Disadvantages: can be biased, only have the views of one researcher. A case study could take a while to collect all the data, and the data isn't always able to be linked to the general public. The sporting example is collecting anthropometric figures for an under 18 female gymnast. In this case, the development of the gymnast could be recorded over 5 to 10 years, making it longitudinal. The next study we'll be looking at is longitudinal studies. Longitudinal study is an observational research method in which data is gathered for the same subject repeatedly over a long period of time. Longitudinal products can extend over years or even decades. The advantages are they are effective in determining variable patterns over time, they can provide high accuracy when observing change, and are very effective in doing research on developmental treatments. The disadvantages are longitudinal studies require a huge amount of time, they require a large sample size, data is gathered is not 100% reliable. Sporting example: look at the change in heart rate for 50-year-olds who go for a walk every day for 10 years. By doing a longitudinal study, it would allow there to give hard and true evidence that walking would affect the changes in your heart rate. As this has been done over a 10-year period, this can be substantial evidence that walking affects your heart rate. Comparative. Comparing two things, research methodology of collecting data that compares more than one thing. This involves a comparison and contrast between 2 or more sets of data. Advantages are correct guide or template to understanding the other sets of data. By comparing to normative data, it allows you to understand what top standard is. Comparing data can help rank others against each other. Disadvantages are generalization of data in order to compare. If you compare to normative data, this could be unbiased. The sporting example is a group of 10 gymnasts are involved in a research task to see if taking an energy supplement would affect their performance. 5 of them are given the substance and 5 of them aren't. They then perform the same floor routine. The experimenter compare the data to see which group performed the best. By using a comparative study, this helps the researcher to see whether the group that took the energy supplement would have a better score on the floor routine and whether this is because they took the energy supplement or not. Cross-sectional. A cross-sectional study is a type of descriptive observational study which involves measuring different variables in the population of interest at a single point in time. This is taken from a sample population. The data is then examined to try find if any critical patterns of association. The advantages are it is a quick and easy way of analysing data, it is very low in cost, and it contains multiple variables at the time of the data snapshot. Disadvantages are it can be biased, cannot determine why it happens and what the effect is, and it cannot be used to analyse behaviour over a period of time. A sporting example is record the score of five different female gymnasts on the floor ages 11, 12, 13, 14 and 15. The final case study we are going to be looking at is experimental. An experiment is a procedure carried out to support variables or a hypothesis. They provide an insight into the cause and effect by demonstrating what outcome occurs when a particular factor is manipulated. The advantages are it is straightforward and efficient, it is repeatable and reliable, controlled environment means better results can be achieved. The disadvantages are can create artificial situations, it is expensive and requires a lab, this can be subjective, so human error. The sporting example could be, does the substance increase the level of flexibility in the hamstrings for young British female gymnasts? We now move on to the types of data, and these are primary and secondary data. There are two different types of data collection, and these are primary and secondary data. Primary data is an original research that is obtained through first-hand investigation, e.g., you have carried out the experiment yourself. The advantages are it is direct, tailored to current research, it is reliable as you have done it yourself, so you know all of the procedures that you went through in order to get your results. Disadvantages are risk of bias as you are doing it yourself, so therefore you may favour the results as a result of this. It costs a lot of your time, can cost a lot of your own money, and it takes a lot of trial and error. Example of primary data would be if a researcher was to test the effect of a drug on female gymnasts' flexibility and there had been no other previous research based on that experiment before, this would be primary data. Secondary data is research that is widely available and obtained from another party. It is research that somebody else has done and you're using this for yourself. The advantages are it is rapidly available, is all you really need to do is just say type into Google to find it out. So say if I was looking to find out the effect that Lucozade has on your energy levels, I would just search that into Google and it would come up with examples. It is inexpensive, it has insight and support. The disadvantages are it gives insufficient detail, variable quality. The example would be if there had, this is relating back to my other example that I gave before, if there had been research done on that flexibility experiment before the research we did, this would be collecting secondary data. Types of data collection. There are two different types of data collection that can take place. These are qualitative and quantitative data. Qualitative data. Qualitative data is data that is free form and is non-numerical. It enables the researcher to gain a more in-depth analysis about the research and what they are carrying out. Within qualitative data, measurements, there are often two different levels of measurement. These are nominal and ordinal measurements. Nominal data. Nominal data puts data into categories and are mutually exclusive. The labels have no meaning. This method of data collection is least informative as it just gives numerical facts and there are no in-depth explanations behind it. Gymnastics example of where you would use nominal data is if a group of researchers were carrying out a study on 10 British female gymnasts and were looking to find out who could do the most cartwheels in 30 seconds, they may make a bar chart to record this data. This would mean the data would be nominal. Ordinal data. Ordinal data is data that is organized in an ordinal sequence and is more informative than nominal data. The difference between the categories is unknown and the numbers that are allocated do have meanings. Gymnastics example. If you're doing an experiment on 15 8 to 10 years old British female athletes to see if an energy supplement had an effect on their performance, half of the athletes got given the supplement and half didn't. You could record the results of their performance in a table ranking their scores from best to worst. Quantitative data. Quantitative data is any kind of data that can be measured numerically. With quantitative data, there are also two different levels of measurement. These are interval and ratio measurement. Interval data. Interval data is a numerical scale with meaningful orders, and the distance between the scales are equal. The scale goes on in a continuous nature and there is no meaningful zero. A gymnastics example of where you would use interval data would be if you were carrying out a study on the flexibility of 10 female gymnasts from the age of 10 to they were 25. You test them yearly. You would use interval data to plot this, as it would be continuous data, so you would just plot it on the scale and therefore it would be easy to see if there is a relationship between the stretching and the flexibility as the years went on. Ratio data. Ratio is the relation in degree or number between two similar things or a relationship between two quantities. All of the values will be on a smooth scale. Gymnastics example. If you were carrying out an experiment on 10 female gymnasts and 10 male gymnasts, and you made them all do the same stretch routine before performing a flexibility test, you would then look to see if there was a relationship between the two and see if stretching had an effect on it. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.